At 1:23 inches the morning, something inside reactor number 4 went terribly wrong. A sudden surge of power, control rods moving too late, and then an explosion powerful enough to tear open the heart of a nuclear reactor. Flames and radioactive debris shot into the night sky above the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. The blast released radiation hundreds of times greater than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, but just 3 kilometers away. An entire city was still asleep. Inside quiet apartment blocks, families were dreaming. Children were tucked into their beds. Streetlights glowed over empty sidewalks. The city was called Pripyat, and within hours, it would become one of the most famous ghost cities on Earth. But the most disturbing part of this story, when the reactor exploded, no one in the city was warned. Pripyat was never meant to become a ghost city. In fact, it was built to represent the future. The Soviet Union founded the city in 1970 to house workers from the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. But this was not just housing. Pripyat was designed as a model Soviet city. Wide boulevards lined with trees. Modern apartment blocks rising above the skyline. Swimming pools, cinemas, sports halls, schools filled with children. Everything about Pripyat was meant to show the world that nuclear energy represented progress. And for many people, it truly did. Nearly 50,000 residents lived there, most of them young families. The average age in the city was just 26. Pripyat felt alive. Children played in the courtyards. Bicycles rolled through the streets. Workers confidently walked toward the power plant every morning. For many residents, the future looked bright. But something dangerous was already unfolding nearby, and no one in the city could see it. Just 3 kilometers away stood the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, one of the largest nuclear facilities in the Soviet Union. 4 reactors were already operating. 2 more were under construction. From the outside, the complex looked like a triumph of engineering. But inside the system, problems had been quietly ignored. The reactor design had critical flaws. Safety procedures were inconsistent. Warnings from engineers had been dismissed. And on the night of April 26, 1986, a routine safety test was scheduled. At least, that's what it was supposed to be. A simple experiment to see how the reactor would behave during a power outage. But within minutes, the situation began slipping out of control. Operators made several critical mistakes. Power levels dropped dangerously low. Then suddenly surged upward. Steam pressure began building inside the core. And then, everything happened at once. 2 explosions ripped through reactor number 4. The roof of the building was blown apart. Burning graphite blocks scattered across the facility. And the nuclear core itself was exposed to the open air. It was one of the worst nuclear disasters in human history. But the people of Pripyat still had no idea. Morning arrived, and life in the city continued like any other day. People stepped outside their apartments. Children walked to school. Workers boarded buses headed toward the plant. Some residents even gathered on a railway bridge to watch the strange glow coming from the reactor. A shimmering blue light filled the night sky. From a distance, it looked almost beautiful. But what they were actually watching was radiation, invisible particles drifting silently across the city, settling on rooftops, playgrounds, parks, food stands. People breathed it in without knowing. Some residents later described a strange metallic taste in the air. Others began experiencing headaches, nausea, fatigue, but no official warning came. The city kept moving. because the truth was still being hidden, and every passing hour made the disaster worse. At the power plant, firefighters were the first to arrive. They believed they were responding to a normal industrial fire. No protective suits, no radiation equipment. They climbed onto the reactor roof. Some of them picked up burning graphite blocks with their bare hands. None of them realized they were standing next to an open nuclear core. Within minutes, their bodies absorbed lethal doses of radiation. Several firefighters collapsed within hours. Many would die within weeks. But back in Pripyat, the city was still full of life. Nearly 50,000 people continued their normal routines inside a radioactive cloud. And the most dangerous part, radiation cannot be seen. There was no smoke, no smell, no warning signs, just invisible particles slowly poisoning the air. 36 hours after the explosion, authorities finally admitted the truth. Radiation levels across the city were dangerously high. Pripyat had to be evacuated. On the afternoon of April 27, hundreds of buses entered the city. Residents were told to gather outside their buildings. Loudspeakers echoed through the streets. Officials gave calm instructions. The evacuation would only last 3 days. 3 days, until the situation was under control. People were told to pack lightly. Documents, clothes, basic essentials. Everything else could stay behind. After all, they would be returning soon. Families locked their doors. Children carried small bags. Neighbors said goodbye to each other. Pets were left behind. And within a few hours, nearly 50,000 people left the city. The streets of Pripyat fell silent. But those 3 days turned into decades. The residents never returned. The area surrounding the power plant became the Chernobyl exclusion zone, a massive restricted region covering hundreds of square kilometers. Entire villages were abandoned. Forests became contaminated. Farms were left untouched. And Pripyat itself became a city frozen in time. Apartments still contained furniture. Classrooms remained filled with textbooks. Children's toys stayed scattered across bedroom floors. And in the center of the city, an amusement park stood waiting. The Ferris wheel had been built for a celebration. It was supposed to open on May 1st, 1986. But the disaster happened just days before. The wheel never carried a single passenger. Instead, it became the most haunting symbol of the catastrophe, a machine designed to celebrate the future. Standing above a city that had lost one. Over the years, nature slowly reclaimed the abandoned streets. Trees pushed through cracked asphalt. Vines climbed apartment buildings. Wild animals returned to the forests surrounding the city. Foxes roamed the streets. Wolves moved through empty neighborhoods. Birds nest inside abandoned schools. Without humans, nature began healing itself. But the danger never completely disappeared. Radiation still lingers in parts of the exclusion zone. Some radioactive materials will take hundreds of years to decay, which means Pripyat may remain uninhabitable for generations. And that's what makes the city so unsettling. It wasn't destroyed by war. It wasn't buried by a natural disaster. It was abandoned because of something invisible, something created by human technology. Today, Pripyat stands as a strange monument, a warning preserved in concrete and rust. Scientists continue monitoring the region. Controlled tours bring visitors into the exclusion zone every year. They walk through silent streets, photograph abandoned schools, stand beneath the rusting Ferris wheel. For a moment, they witness a city where time stopped. But beyond the empty buildings and haunting photographs, Pripyat represents something deeper. a reminder of how fragile modern civilization can be. Because this city was not ancient. It did not disappear centuries ago. It vanished almost overnight. And the most unsettling question still remains. Have we truly learned from what happened here? Or are we simply waiting for another city to disappear? Pripyat remains silent. Its streets empty, its buildings slowly collapsing beneath the forest. But the story of this city still echoes across the world. A story about ambition, about power, and about the moment when human control slipped away. Because the Ferris wheel in Pripyat was meant to celebrate the future. Instead, it became the symbol of a city that vanished in a single weekend. And if you want to explore more forgotten cities, abandoned places, and the hidden stories behind them, subscribe to Off the Map. Because sometimes, the most fascinating places on Earth are the ones people had to leave behind.